I want to bring in NBC's Garrett Haake at the White House. NBC's Ryan Nobles is on Capitol Hill. Tim Miller is host of the Bulwark podcast and an MSNBC political analyst. And NBC's Christine Romans is with me to break down the broad impacts of the trade war. Welcome to all of you. All right, Garrett, what is the latest on all of this? And is there any chance we'll see the plans for other tariffs change in the next day or so?
I think it's entirely possible, Chris. The president is in the Oval Office talking to reporters as we speak, agreeing with at least the second part of that Wall Street Journal editorial, the idea that no country is fully safe from these tariffs. He says that negotiations will continue with Mexico, despite the fact that on Friday he said there was nothing any of these countries could do to avoid tariffs and that they were not a negotiating tactic at all. You mentioned Justin Trudeau, whom the president's spoken to once already this morning. He's got another call scheduled for around 3 o'clock this afternoon. And he's acknowledging, or at least he was last night when he returned from Florida, that this trade war or these tariffs will hurt American consumers, at least in the short term. Listen.
We may have short term a little pain, and people understand that. But long term, the United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world. We have deficits with almost every country. Not every country, but almost. And we're going to change it. It's been unfair.
Democrats have been seizing on those comments, suggesting that this is a broken campaign promise by a president who ran on lowering prices, enacting a policy here at the start of week 3, which can only lead to raise them. We'll see where these other negotiations go today, Chris, because it's clearly a live ball.
Well, I mean, look, I want to tell people that we got some notes from the pool. The folks are actually allowed to go into the Oval Office. It's a small group, and then they report back to us. So we got these bullet points. He said he has already talked to the Prime Minister, Trudeau, and that they had a great talk. But he says also, we haven't agreed on tariffs yet with Mexico. We're not well treated by Canada. Nobody is out of tariffs. Is there any level of confidence that folks out in the world who will be impacted like this know what's going on?
No, there shouldn't be. I mean, look, Chris, I covered the entirety of Donald Trump's campaign. There is nothing he likes more as a policy tool to solve any particular policy problem than the application of tariffs. If you pick your foreign policy issue, Donald Trump has a tariff that he thinks would be useful for it, or at least to threaten it. And I think that's the space we're in right now. In some cases, I think he believes there are trade issues, the sort of appropriate use, if you think tariffs could ever be appropriately used, with a country like China, for example. But his issues with Canada and certainly with Mexico don't really appear to be about trade at all. Remember, he negotiated a brand new trade agreement with those two countries in his first term. He's been talking about drugs coming over the border. He's been talking about migration. This is an attempt, I think, to use one tool at his unilateral disposal as president of the United States to shake out some results on a variety of different issues.
So, Christine, let me go to you, because the last point that we've heard from the pool so far, and again, as Garrett tells us, he's still in the Oval. He may still be taking questions. But Donald Trump said, we don't need Canadian cars, lumber, or agriculture. You have a lot of information about our trading partners and what they do and don't bring to the table. So help us out here.
Well, the National Association of Home Builders and other home building groups would say otherwise, that actually the U.S. does rely on a lot of those things right now, and putting taxes on them is going to make them more expensive. I mean, look at these 3 trading partners. These $1.2 trillion of goods the U.S. imported from these 3 countries just in the first 11 months of last year. That is a lot. That means all that stuff is going to cost more money to bring into the U.S. And you talk about Canadian oil. Yes, the U.S. is drilling more energy than it has ever done, breaking records. But it also is importing from Canada. It imports Canadian oil that then is refined in the U.S. and goes into American cars as gasoline. And experts say gasoline prices would increase 15 to 25 cents a gallon if that 10% tariff on Canadian oil goes into effect, as opposed to the 25% on everything else. Now, you talk about cars. President Donald Trump wrote the rules for how cars cross the border and then are sold in the U.S., right? What percentage of these cars can be assembled, or parts of them can be made in Canada and Mexico? He wrote those rules in the USMCA in his first administration. Now he wants to get rid of those rules and put tariffs on car parts. That will add $3,000 to the cost of new cars, experts tell us, because these parts cross borders over and over and over again. These are very intricate supply lines that basically this is a bomb going off in those supply lines. So one thing after another, there are worries you'll see higher prices. Mexico on pause for the week. So these are some of the goods from Mexico. All of this stuff comes from Canada. Did you know that 81% of frozen French fries come from Canada? I did not know that. But they have the...
Wait, French fries?
Yes, now you're concerned.
Yes.
Your French fries here. And then technology. If you don't have carve-outs for some of these big tech companies that make their products in China, these tariffs in China will add to the cost of your goods. That's what the Consumer Tech Association says. So it's not whether prices will rise under a new tariff regime or trade war, Chris. It's how much. That's the debate we're having here.
Okay, so Tim, the criticisms came fast and furious once all of this got announced, but supporters will say, look, and you just heard this from Kristi Noem, it's working. Mexico is sending more troops to the border. Is this a win for Donald Trump, or is he just going to present it that way?
Well, I think that he's just going to present it that way. It's all about the PR for these guys. I noticed my governor, Jeff Landry, was there standing next to Kristi Noem. That's not in Louisiana. We've got a lot happening in Louisiana. We could use him here, I would think, instead of doing press conferences at the border. But look, this is just to demonstrate how much just PR this is, Chris. Like, on the one, just think about how incoherent this is. On the one hand, Trump says we need these tariffs, right? That the tariffs are necessary because we're getting getting taken advantage of. We want to build more stuff here in America. Yes. We don't want to import stuff from other countries. Like, we need it for economic reasons. But then the stock market goes down, and he says, oh, well, I've cut a deal with Mexico. They're going to put 10,000 troops at the border. But wait a minute. I thought the tariffs were needed for economic reasons. I thought we were being treated unfairly by Mexico on economics. Now you're telling me that just some troops at the border, which, by the way, Biden got 10,000 troops in the border in 2021. She sent troops to the border, or he did. The old president sent troops to the border in 2019 with Trump. So, like, the message is just incoherent. Trump is creating chaos and then taking credit on the back end. And that's what you're saying here.
Yeah, here's another thing, Tim. Well, this morning, the director of the National Economic Council said the media has it all wrong. This has nothing to do with trade, that it's 100% about the drug war. Problem is, when you're talking about Canada, the DEA says only, and I say this, only 43 pounds of fentanyl was seized at the northern border last year. That is a tiny fraction of what was seized at the Mexican border. And the reaction of Canadians has not been kind. Take a listen.
Are they going to prove?
Those are Canadian sports fans booing our national anthem in Toronto. Same thing happened in Ottawa. What is it about Canada that has Donald Trump so upset?
Yeah, I mean, it's even more incoherent than you lay out, right? Like, they say it's about fentanyl, but barely any fentanyl comes across the border from Canada. So then why is he letting Mexico off the hook right now, where all the fentanyl is coming in, or most of it at least? A lot's coming in from ports as well. But then, at least for now, keeping the tariffs on Canada. That doesn't make any sense. J.D. Vance tweeted yesterday, I don't want to hear about the sob stories from Canada. Are they contributing enough to NATO? And it's like, well, wait a minute. This is about NATO contributions now? I thought it was about fentanyl. And but then the president is saying it's not about either of those things. It's about how we need the tariffs for economic purposes. Like, they're not even explaining it. It's completely incoherent, and it's causing, if he goes through with this, it's going to cause major disruptions in Canada. You know, our close trading partner, our ally, a country that sent troops to wars that we were participating in to stand with us, and we're going to do it for what? He can't even explain what it's for. Like, they change every minute why they're doing it. Like, it's just because he likes the chaos and the reality show of it all, and he thinks tariffs is a beautiful word.
Well, Donald Trump says, Garrett, that, again, I'm looking at the second set of notes that have come out of the Oval Office. He says they'll speak to China in the next 24 hours, probably. China won't be involved in the Panama Canal for long. China will be dealt with on the Panama Canal. Tariffs were just an opening salvo, and the tariffs will go up if we can't make a deal. There does seem, to your point, to, at least in his rhetoric, to be an awful lot of focus on getting this done.
Yeah, look, I think that's right. And again, I mean, we became familiar with this during the campaign. To Donald Trump, it's sort of like the adage of if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. He has, unilaterally as president, a wide authority to implement and to threaten tariffs on adversaries and on allies alike. And he is using that across the spectrum of foreign policy issues to try to achieve a desired result. Now, on Friday, he was arguing publicly to reporters in the Oval Office in a setting much like the one that's happening right now, that was not his goal, that he was not trying to negotiate, and that he didn't want anything from these countries on whom he was placing tariffs. He has clearly shown that not to be the case. And so I think we just have to continue to look at all of these threats as threats until proven otherwise. He wants to try to keep lines of communication open, in some cases to appear to have the upper hand. Whether or not he does, it depends on the issue. And I think we're going to continue to see this play out, across the next 12 hours until the first deadline for Canada and China, and the next month for Mexico, if indeed that's where the deadline lands.